A very good evening and welcome to the second of our two Overview and Scrutiny board meetings for today, Monday, the 18th of May 2020. This is the 6 p.m. meeting, the second of two today, which will predominantly deal with the cabinet-related scrutiny items for the forthcoming cabinet. I will just go through some housekeeping before we start. For those of us that have joined us for previous meetings, we are now working under the new government legislation for virtual meetings. So all of those that are joining us today are doing so from the comforts of their own home. And a warm welcome to all of the board members, to all of the cabinet members, other members of the council, officers, and indeed to members of the press and public that are watching us remotely. You're all very, very welcome. As with previous meetings, although this is a virtual meeting, most of the other aspects of the formal meetings remain the same, so we can continue to make formal recommendations and points as we would in any other meeting. It does obviously change how we run the meeting, and accordingly I will just run through some brief housekeeping. So please note that this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure that the meeting is effectively managed, please could everybody present follow the following ground rules for speaking. Firstly, if you could only speak when invited to by myself, the Chairman. Secondly, if you could state your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. There are people that will be dialing in without the ability to see what is going on, so that will help to assist them to know who is speaking. Thirdly, if you can mute your microphone when you are not talking. Fourthly, if you would like to speak, if you could use the instant messaging panel on the left and put the letters RTS request to speak and then push the send button. That will enable me as chairman to control who is wishing to speak and at what time to maintain the flow of the meeting. If there are any recommendations that need to be moved that require a formal vote, these will be carried out by myself as chairman, asking for a response for, against or abstain for each councillor of the board. The regulations governing virtual meetings require all participants to hear and be heard throughout. Therefore, when voting, I will ask participants to do so in acknowledgement that they have heard the debate and been engaged in the meeting throughout in accordance with the regulations. If you do not feel that this has been the case throughout the meeting and you have missed any part of it, please alert me using the chat window and therefore abstain from voting. Finally, should the connection of myself as chairman be lost throughout the meeting, the vice chairman, Councillor May Haynes, will take over. A short adjournment will be agreed unless connection is resumed. Viewers of the live feed at that point may see a holding screen throughout the adjournment. And finally, please ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum as far as possible, and as always, that all mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. So that's the housekeeping over and done with. Moving on to item 1 of our agenda, I'm looking for apologies, and I'll go to Claire for apologies. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. And we have apologies for this meeting from Councillor Rachel Maidment, and she is being substituted by Councillor Marcus Andrews.
Thank you very much, which moves us on to item 3 of the agenda, which is declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any local interest on any items on the forthcoming agenda? I have an indication from Councillor Brooke. Councillor Brooke.
Fine. Thank you, Chair. It's in relation to section 7 on the agenda of regeneration. There are 2 items in there relating to work being done by Bournemouth Development Company, and as a member of their board, I'm declaring a local interest.
Hello, Chair. On here. Hello.
So, Phil, we think you're on mute.
Apologies, Councillor Bartlett, I was on mute, telling you that you were on mute. So I can now hear you, and hopefully you can hear me. Councillor Bartlett.
Yes, thank you. There are some agenda items related to housing policy this evening. I already have publicly declared interest in the housing company in the town. So I just bring the committee's attention to that for transparency purposes only, but they are not a pecuniary interest in the items being discussed this evening.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Mike Green.
Thank you. Same as Councillor Bartlett, for transparency, we'll say that we have rental property in the town.
Thank you very much. Do I have any further declarations of interest? Councillor Nicola Green.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, and mine is exactly the same as the two above, in line with my declaration, which has already been made.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any further declarations of interest, in which case there will be another opportunity if colleagues discover at a later point that they have realised on an agenda item, and I'll be pleased to receive it then. We'll now move on to item 4, which is public issues, and I'll pass to Claire for public items. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. This is just to confirm that in order to ensure public issues can still be addressed whilst meetings are being held under the COVID-19 local authority meeting regulations, all public questions, statements or petitions will, whenever possible, be circulated to the board prior to the meeting, and responses will be published on the council's website and referred to at this meeting. One public statement has been received from Michael Hancock, a BCP resident, in relation to the Cabinet report on Holes Bay. I have a copy of his statement which I will read out to you now. Harbour Ambition applaud the proposal for BCP Council to purchase the former power station site. In particular, the ambitions for affordable housing, exemplar sustainability innovation, and creating a truly vibrant neighbourhood. We wish to highlight, however, that the report does not include the option of a three-way partnership between BCP Council, the private sector, and a community-led development organisation. We have identified funding options to support an innovative and collaborative master planning and consent process, reducing the need for further council funding. We would encourage the Council to add this to the list of options for further detailed consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. That brings to a close item number 4. We'll now move on to item number 5, which is the Chairman's update. I will keep this brief. This is the second of our 2 meetings today, and many of the things were covered in the first meeting. With particular respect to the items that have been covered in this Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting, we do have a couple of items which do have confidential aspects to them. Therefore, if we do wish to talk about any of the points raised in the confidential papers, we will need to be very mindful and move below the line into confidential session. Having looked through the papers and having a chat with a number of members of the board, I'm hopeful and confident that we can have certainly the vast majority of that discussion relating to the public part of those items. But just to remind board members, be very, very careful about only referring to the public aspects of the paper in this meeting, and if at any point any members wish to discuss the confidential items, please do indicate to me again via the instant messenger, and at that point, if we feel it's necessary, we can go below the line and consider them in a non-public session. But it would be better, I think, if we can avoid that. Secondly, something we didn't really cover in the first meeting, we are now dealing with the what I would consider to be the slightly more normal aspect of what we've been doing under our scrutiny, certainly for the last year, which is considering a number of cabinet-related items and the scrutiny around those. Traditionally, the Overview and Scrutiny Board has been looking at those items in general, but also with specific reference to the recommendations that will be presented to Cabinet about whether we have any thoughts on those, and indeed whether we have any recommendations of our own. So we haven't up to this point, because under the virtual settings, made any recommendations as an Overview and Scrutiny Board, primarily because we've been dealing mainly with the COVID response. We are now back into what is more normal territory, so if we do wish to make recommendations, I would ask members of the board to indicate at which point. As an added helpful addition, actually, we do have the ability to share the text for any suggested amendments or recommendations that people may have via the instant messenger, which could help streamline the process. But if you do wish to bring anything to the vote, or any recommendations you wish to put forward any time, please just do indicate to me. In which case, we will now move straight on to item 6. We've split the board meeting as per our usual board meetings into the different service areas. So item 6 is the scrutiny of housing-related cabinet reports for the forthcoming cabinet meeting. We have one of those, which is the Seascape Group Limited 5-year strategic plan 2020 to 2025, and I will call on Councillor Wilson to provide us a brief update on this paper. Before he does, just a bit of guidance. We have a lot to get through in this particular board meeting, a number of different items, some of which are quite meaty. So I'll be asking all of the cabinet members, in virtue of the fact that most of the, well, or hopefully all of the board members will have read the papers in detail, to use the opportunity to give a brief introduction of the paper, of anything that you wish to bring out within 5 minutes. Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Cheers, thank you, I appreciate that. So in front of you, you'll have the Seascape Group 5-year plan. It sets out our 5-year vision up to 2025. The activities within Seascape Group Limited will contribute to a number of our corporate strategy objectives. However, it primarily ensures the investment in the homes needed to tackle rough sleeping and homelessness. This 5-year plan allows a longer-term ambition to be articulated. It is critical that the plan and the financial forecasts remain flexible as external factors impact. And obviously, we're all aware of one very big external factor impacting us all now in COVID-19, which will obviously have a significant impact on plans and companies nationally. So we need to understand the full impact of that in due course and consider how we respond. However, we felt it was important that we did bring this forward to present our ambitions for the group. We want to accelerate growth over the next 5 years, which will be achieved by providing services across the geographical area, expanding into Christchurch and Poole, which will in turn create a larger customer base. We want to also expand our activity by utilising existing skills, resources, but also investing in additional capacity, pursuing new business opportunities, including building new homes for private rent and sale. I don't know whether, Chair, you want me to push on into the subsidiaries and go into a bit more detail, or if that's brief enough for you.
I think at this stage that's a very rounded summary. I'll if any members of the board wish to draw out any further details, then I'm quite happy for that to happen. So I will now open it up to members of the board for any questions of Councillor Wilson regarding this. Obviously, we will have all seen the papers, which has the content of the actual 5-year strategic plan in it. We also have the cabinet paper, which has the 2 recommendations, which are going through to cabinet as well. So do any members of the board wish to have any questions or comments on this paper? Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a few points in there. Can I ask, are the employees of Seascape South, are they employed by the council or by the limited company?
I believe it's by the council, but I can just go to clarification to Lorraine Mealings, Director of Housing.
Yep. Hello there, Lorraine speaking. I'll put my camera on. Yeah, there are no employees actually within Seascape South. They're actually employed through another company, Bournemouth Building Maintenance Limited. So that is where the staff sit that often Seascape South use to carry out some of the work.
Okay, so I noticed that there's an investment of £100,000 for additional staff in the plan. So will they be council employees?
Quite possibly, yes, because I think there's a recognition within the plan that we need expertise to help drive that business forward and make the business plan a reality, really. So they are likely to be council employees, yes.
It just seems odd that limited company, which is supposed to be able to stand on its own merits, the risk is essentially through the staff that it employs, which are employed by the council. And I'm looking at some of the projections, and I can see now probably why the profits that are being projected through the company are so small. That's probably because the financial risk is being carried by the council. Would you agree with that?
I don't know really. I think essentially the companies are wholly owned by the local authority, aren't they? In terms of all the subsidiaries, so the risk ultimately sits with the shareholder as BCP council for all of the companies.
So, what is the main purpose of having a limited company? Is it because it reduces the tax liability? Can you just explain what is the purpose of having a limited company?
I think the detail, without going into too much detail, I think the companies allow us to trade externally. Obviously, there's certain things that a local authority can and can't do, and there's lots of legal implications behind having a company structure or not. So there was lots of guidance at the time when the companies were set up, and essentially it allows us to trade externally, which is quite helpful in our current budgetary situation.
Okay. I mean, Seascape South has effectively been trading for quite some time, hasn't it? Several years now, isn't it?
As I understand it, yes.
Because looking at the projection, the profit margin is only like 2% or something after tax. I just wondered, with a company operating on those sort of margins, how it's going to get the investment of £100,000 to pay for these additional staff.
I think just my final comment on that, I guess, is that what the strategic plan is suggesting is a real step change in scaling up all of the operations, which is quite ambitious, I guess, but it is really moving and rescaling the companies into something much bigger.
Okay, I think obviously I don't want to sort of hog the show here with lots of questions, but I do have a lot of. I've got some general concerns about the work being automatically placed through the council, through Seascape South, and to go into private building. There's no mention of building for social housing. It's about building in the main for private housing, which I find a little strange as well. But anyway, I think I better move on because I'm hogging the show here a bit. I know you want to get on.
Councillor Wilson, you wish to come back on any of those points?
I think just to say that I think the idea of generating profit is to reinvest into the council and its services, whether that be social housing or other elements of the council. And what was your first point? Sorry, just then, Councillor Bartlett, because I did have.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've just got the general disquiet. I mean, basically, we've got a company owned by the council, which is going to be using council land to build private properties on, using council employees, but where I'm seeing very, very low profit margins, and entering into a really expanded area of business. It's just raising a lot of questions in my mind about, strategically why is it being done, and whether we've got the wherewithal to actually do that. I mean, I guess there are advantages in that borrowing money is probably going to be a bit cheaper, but then you start getting to the question of is this anti-competitive in terms of the free market? Because it does seem that you can provide the land, you can provide the finance, you can provide the staff, and you can then get allocated the task of building actually building the projects out. And it just seems to me it's sort of one organisation doing it all, and I've just got questions about the principles behind it. That's all.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if Councillor Slade or Councillor Beasley, who are actually on Seascape Group, would like to come in. However, what I would say is that this is a step change in order to see how things go. and we are essentially, these are just estimates. You know, these are projections. It's a 5-year plan. It's not the what necessarily will happen. You know, so I think that has to be considered. But no, I take on board your points, Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you very much. Do any other?
Did you want me just to make a contribution?
Sorry, is that Councillor Slade? Yes, Councillor Slade.
Councillor Slade, yeah. Historically, the companies have given an annual update, which has been described as an annual plan, but it's not been. It's been a report on the previous year. And historically, the companies have been dealing with initially the purchase of properties that we can then rent out to extremely vulnerable people in the homeless market. So providing a way that we can enable the homeless to get back into secure housing without in a much more sort of cohesive manner before they step out into the sort of private sector. And the other company, Seascape Homes and Properties, Seascape South, is the company with which we do most of our improvements, disability improvements for mostly our council tenants. So actually we're providing in the main services to vulnerable people who are reliant on the council for their homes and for the security of their homes. What we're looking to do is to actually explore the fact that having this type of company enables us to increase the lower cost private sector tenanted market where there is a lack of supply. So this isn't about us going out there and building luxury flats. This is about us being able to use the land that we have to create affordable housing in the private rented sector, which doesn't actually mean that we've got to put this property into our housing revenue account and therefore be subject to right to buy. So, you know, it is a different way of us being able to have an influence on the housing market in a way that we haven't done historically. Now, the way that the companies were set up was done under Bournemouth Council. I'm sure you probably got a lot more information on how that was done in the time that you were on Bournemouth Council. We've picked it up as a up and running company, and what we're seeking to do is to make sure that if we're going to have wholly owned subsidiary companies of the council, that they actually start to deliver decent levels of income back to the council to support our medium-term financial plan. So historically, yes, the profit margins have been very, very small, but there has been little ambition in the last couple of years about when you're setting these things up. There is a plan to take this to the next level. Obviously, that's going to be impacted by COVID, but we're confident that we're well placed to do things like small construction projects. So, for example, some of our beachfront things, some of our school projects. We had a school last year that was let down by a private organisation that we had to step in as Seascape and be able to support. So I think, you know, it's an exciting opportunity for the council, and we will be moving forward and very happy to sit and talk you through the details of the strategic plan.
Thank you very much. I also have an indication from Councillor Beasley, who sits on the board as well, who wishes to speak. Councillor Beasley.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've just emphasised the points made by Councillor Slade, most particularly around Seascape Homes and Properties, where those most vulnerable people are being accommodated through the capital programme of the company, and that capital programme was enlarged a while ago, and the opportunities that are out there, which the officers are pursuing for purchase of properties, are ones which will help us to relieve those homeless people and to make sure that the council is able to play its part quite separately from anything else that it's doing elsewhere. And we are stepping up here, and I think now is the opportune time to be doing that. And certainly the board is unanimous in its support for the strategy. I think that should be made very clear, and that is something which we want to build on in order that we can then do far more in that homeless part of the company's activities. Hope that helps. Happy to talk to Councillor Bartlett or anybody else outside of the meeting if Councillor Slade wishes me to do so.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beasley. I'm not seeing, are there any other board members wishing to speak on this item?
Chair, could I just come back on one little point on that, please? Yeah, the issue, I mean, I understand the excellent work that Seascape Homes is doing with housing potentially homeless and homeless families. I don't hold any shrift with that whatsoever. The area that I'm concerned about is entering into fairly substantial private building projects on council land under the belief that the council is able to do that through that company in a more effective way than the private building companies already do. My experience is that the council built projects are far more expensive than those built under normal commercial means. And so that's I guess is at the bottom of my concern. But nevertheless, you know, I wouldn't want to stand in the way of the council trying to do it effectively. But I need some convincing out of a project to actually see that it can actually happen in practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. I have Councillor Farquhar indicating. Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just pick up on Councillor Bartlett's question as regards the social housing side of things. I think it's a bit of a catch-22 situation with the nature of right to buy, in that the council is not incentivised to build social housing simply because it means that it has to sell it at a loss to its housing stock. My question really is that if we're entering into changing the market by, as Councillor Bartlett says, by building on council land, private market of a lower end, e.g. not luxury apartments, does the council plan to buy those properties after it's purchased it to add it to its portfolio stock?
Councillor Wilson.
And the portfolio stock of Seascape Homes and Property. Is that what you're asking, Councillor Farquhar?
The council stock.
I think it's going to be added to the portfolio of the company.
Yeah, so Seascape properties that are built and retained or purchased back by this would not sit within the housing revenue account. Therefore they're not subject to the right to buy, which enables you to be renting out property and actually have more private rental properties available to the public without there being a risk that we then, as you said, Councillor Farquhar, then release it back to private individuals at a potential loss to the council.
Thank you very much. I've got no further indications from colleagues wishing to speak, so I'll draw this discussion to a close. We've considered the item and the recommendations and drawn out a few parts. So thank you very much to Councillor Wilson and to Councillor Slade and Councillor Beasley for your input on that. I'll now move to item 7, which is the scrutiny of the regeneration-related cabinet reports. We have a number of these to consider this evening, which we will take in turn. The first that we are looking to consider is the plan around the Holes Bay site. I believe we have Councillor Howell and Councillor Wilson joining us to give us a brief introduction on that. As I mentioned to colleagues earlier on, there is an additional paper for this which deals with the confidential items for this paper. So if we could keep the discussion to the public paper at this stage, and as previously mentioned, if any colleagues do wish to discuss further the items in the confidential section, please do indicate to me, and if need be we can go below the line, but it would be preferable to have as much debate in public as we can do. So I don't know who's going to go first, but I'll pass to Councillor Howell and to Councillor Wilson to give a 5-minute introduction to the item. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a very exciting project for a very long time, Poole Council tried to deliver housing on in the regeneration area, which roughly, well, it's basically between the two bridges, the two maritime bridges in Poole, the land either side. The Twin Sails Bridge was built to facilitate that development, particularly on the power station site, but unfortunately, no significant development has really taken place. There has been some relatively low-level development in one corner of the site, one of the sites, but it has essentially stalled. The council was depending on the private sector to deliver housing in this area, but and as a consequence of that, it had negotiated with the Dorset LEP a £5 million contribution towards works on the sea wall. Unfortunately, that £5 million was not enough to persuade the two owners of the site to continue to actually move forward with development, and we were at risk, serious risk, when we inherited control of the council. We were at serious risk of losing that money. And through a lot of hard work by the officers, we've managed to repurpose that money towards acquisition of the site, and that's also clearly set out in the papers. And this is a really exciting opportunity to take what is one of the largest brownfield development sites in the southwest of England and deliver a substantial amount of housing, a real community with community cultural facilities, and really create a place that people want to live and feel that they are properly connected into Poole Town Centre, reduce the need for them to drive, and essentially deliver a lot of our housing needs. But I'd like to pass over to my colleague, Councillor Wilson, to talk about the housing aspect.
I was on mute. Yes, no, thank you, Councillor Howell. Yeah, obviously, we presented this last summer. We were looking to acquire the site, and we presented a strategy to do so. And the reason for that is because it is the largest brownfield site in the conurbation. It's the biggest opportunity we have to provide a number of homes which meets our targets, both in terms of housing delivery but also in terms of our corporate strategy, and the site is really a great opportunity to do something different and to do something innovative, and to be potentially kind of an exemplar nationally. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity, and one that we can't really turn down. So I'm happy to stop there and open up to questions for myself and Councillor Howell.
Before we do that, can I just recognise Mr. Hancock's statement that was read out at the start of the meeting? The report considers, well, just puts down two possible options in terms of development of the site, but certainly I would love to see community involvement as well. This should be about creating a community, as I say, and therefore if we can work with community partners, that would be great.
Thank you very much to Councillor Howell and to Councillor Wilson. I'll open it up to board members for questions in a moment, but I will start with a few of my own, if I may. Obviously very supportive of anything which brings forward active regeneration across our area, and that should be applauded, in particular the £5 million grant from the Dorset LEP, which I think is very positive news. Just a couple of questions, which is more about the detail, I suppose. We traditionally in the board look at the risk around decision making. I think perhaps that's something to explore. We've heard a lot about the why, and I think not many people would disagree that it's a worthy thing to intervene here and to look at doing. But we haven't heard too much about the how. And I suppose the two questions that I have: firstly, obviously we are still purchasing something, so there is a financial implication to this. And in light of the situation we have around us, are we confident that that borrowing is furnishable in the short term? And that kind of links into the second, which is about the slightly longer term vision around this. I understand that the site has planning permissions and things from the past. There's some indication in the paper about a change of direction, and do we not think it would have been appropriate at the same time as buying it to explore a little bit deeper what we wanted to do with the site? So I don't know who wants to take those questions, but there were two to start with. Councillor Howell? Yes. I mean, this is an exciting opportunity to do something really very, very different and very up to date. What we don't want to do is take a standard developer model and just roll it out, because the danger of that is that we don't deliver the community the benefits that will deliver a place that really people want to live in. We have an opportunity here to do that, and that does involve some risk. You said there was a planning application that was passed. There isn't. There's a planning application which is in progress at the moment, but it has been stalled, and the current owners did not choose to progress that. We have the support of Homes England. They've been very positive about supporting this development, and without saying anything more on that, I feel that the time is right now for us as a council to go forward and make this happen. Obviously, the COVID situation does introduce risk, as it does in all areas, but one of the responsibilities of the council is to look long term, and we have the ability and the financing models to be able to progress schemes when the private sector is struggling. And the private sector has been struggling for a long time to deliver this, and it's pretty clear that it wasn't going to happen without government money and council intervention. It comes with some risk, there's no denying that, but it also comes with the opportunity, and we will be fully involving members in the development of the proposals that go forward. It will be governed by it'll be oversight by the member advisory panel, which is a cross-party panel looking after pool regeneration, and we will be having, as you know, an all-member seminar so that any member of the council who has questions on this project can ask them and receive some comfort before the vote in council. Thank you very much, Councillor Howell. I have an indication to speak from Councillor Mellor. Councillor Mellor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, just like to say I'm absolutely delighted this is coming forward. It's excellent, and I completely agree with Councillor Howell. What an opportunity on that site. It's obviously been a site that's caused frustration for a long time. So I commend the officers and the councillors who've driven this forward. Thank you. I do agree with your comments, Chair. If this is substantially, I think very, very different was the word, coming forward. It would be great to see some detail on that. The time will come for that, and we look forward to it. Specific question I did have was, in the report it says we're waiting till 21-22 for the non-design specific remediation. Anybody involved in this site for a long time will, or a number of other projects, the pace of these things moving forward can be a frustration, and I'm just so keen that we try and drive that as far forward as possible. So could somebody just explain to me the logic of why that's, we're waiting for the non-design specific remediation to start when we're going to, in a year or 2 years time, when we're going to be buying it hopefully in the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Howell.
Yes, I mean, I'd just like to ask Bill Cotton, I think, to speak on the detail of that. But I'd say in general that we want to pursue this as quickly as possible as a scheme, and that's one of the advantages that the council has. That it doesn't have to follow the traditional model of a developer where they build a slab of houses and sell those houses to finance the next portion of the development. So that model would take 50 to 20 years to build out. You know, we want to build out more quickly than that, and we are prepared to work with partners to make that happen. Perhaps, Bill, could you comment on the remediation?
Mr. Cotton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll just put my video on as well, so you can see me in action. Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, the question about getting on with some of the remediation work, I think there's various bits of work we need to do. As you know, it's a former power station, so it is. There's some contamination on the site. There's a big concrete slab on the site as well. So there's still quite a lot of geotechnical investigation to be done, and we've got to do some further work building on the work that the landowners have done to really understand where the issues lie. So there'll be further surveys and then negotiations with funders, potentially Homes England, to work out how we're going to fund the remediation. So I think suffice to say, we've got you know, as Councillor Howell said, we're very keen to get on with it, and we'll move it as soon as possible. But we've got to be realistic about sometimes how long these bits of work take.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, Chair, just to come back on that, I understand that. So maybe the report is just slightly unhelpful in the fact that, from what I understand from what you said there, Bill, is the non-design specific remediation is starting ASAP. But it just, if there's a process involved in that around, you know, site surveys, etc. Yeah, you know, I just want to, you know, leave, you know, you and, you know, Mark and Kieran in under no certain terms really keen to get this moving forward. And if we, you know, anything we can do to do that, we should be looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, just to Chair, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I think we, as myself and Councillor Howell and all of our team, are very keen to move it as fast as possible as well. You know, we do have a housing need that needs to be met, and I think that in terms of recovery with COVID as well, potentially this can be an opportunity for that. You know, the housing delivery and construction have strong ties to the economy, and it has potential for jobs and wider growth in the BCP area. So yeah, we're very keen to get it moved as well.
If I could just add something to that, one thing, there is a basis of a scheme, as I alluded to earlier, that is stuck in planning, but that what happened over the years was that the developers moved the goalpost down in terms of the number of delivery of units on the site. So I personally believe that there's an opportunity to deliver significantly more units than is in that planning application. And I think we need to be ambitious and say, if we put the right facilities on site, the amenities for the people are going to be living there, we can push the numbers a bit and in terms of the units.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Howell. Chief Executive wishes to come in. Graham.
Thanks, Joe. Just briefly to say that the history of this site is that the current owners have owned it for a long time, haven't brought it forward. I think we all recognise that we'd prefer to acquire the site with a scheme in place, but actually these owners will sit on it for a long time. One is a financier who effectively holds land until it's worth more money than it was. The other is a housing association whose main interest is in London. They acquired this site as a result of acquiring a range of sites from Gallagher's, I think it was, and they probably weren't expecting to own this site when they went into the transaction, other than that it was in the list of things that they acquired. So I think the reality for the council is, if we don't do this, this site will not be brought forward. If we do it, it has a chance of bringing forward. So it is slightly unusual in terms of timing. I think we should all recognise that. But given the circumstances and the LEP grant and everything else, it makes it worthwhile.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. I think we have a bit of a unanimity there. Exciting project, and hopefully we can all work together to get on with it, and look forward to being involved into the future. I see no further questions from colleagues on the board. We've had no recommendations or anything put forward, in which case I will thank Bill Cotton, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Howell and the Chief Executive, and move on to the next item. Thank you very much for joining us on that one. The second item that we're considering under the scrutiny of regeneration related cabinet projects and reports is the Bournemouth Development Company 5-year business plan. Again, I'll move to Councillor Howell to give a brief introduction before we move to questions on that. Councillor Howell, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Bournemouth Development Company was another one of these companies that was created under Bournemouth Borough Council, and which we have inherited. Its purpose was to get regeneration going within Bournemouth Town Centre primarily, and has been successful in doing that, delivering a number of schemes. This paper simply is introducing an updated business plan, the main items being a kind of recognition that the Durley Chine project is now could go ahead because of the planning permission that has been granted on appeal for that, and also that there's a potential extension into Poole and the delivery of a site in Poole Town Centre. I've been impressed with how the structure has been set up for the operation of the joint venture. I should have said that the company is a joint venture with Morgan Sindall, private sector developer, 50/50. In terms of the benefits that it delivers to the area, in addition to providing housing and other facilities in terms of regeneration, I have been impressed by their commitment to using local suppliers on projects, and it certainly injects additional monies into our local economy as a result of that. I think that's probably all I need to say at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. I'll open it up to board members in a moment for questions, but I will start if that's all right. As you well know, have a long history with this, so always pleased to see a summary of how things are going. As you referenced, probably the two main things that are brought out in the business plan, which are what I would call kind of new news. First of all, the expansion, a potential expansion into Poole with the Chapel Lane car park project, and secondly, and probably slightly more relevantly, the decision, I suppose, to proceed with the Durley Road project. The Durley Road in particular, just wanted your views on this. This was a slightly complicated one. In that, of course, it was within the initial option agreement, but it became very clear when it went to the planning board, and certainly the wider feeling in the then Bournemouth Council, and I doubt very much has changed, that there was a degree of opposition to the actual development taking place, hence the reason it got refused planning permission for all sorts of reasons. Obviously, that has now gone to appeal, and the appeal has brought forward the option to deliver the site. Of course, that doesn't mean that we have to deliver the site, and can I just have your view as a cabinet member? I mean, I assume what you're saying is because we've got the appeal in place, you have taken the decision that you would like to see this particular site progress?
No, I haven't. We have a policy in cabinet that we make all decisions as cabinet and not as individual members. And this scheme, if Durley Road was to go ahead, it would come forward as a cabinet decision. So I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on that at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Bartlett, do you wish to speak?
Sorry, I'm having a bit of finger trouble here, Chair. That's better. Thank you. Yeah, Just a bit of a history here. I was on the planning board when the original application came through. There was significant opposition to the development by residents of the town, and in particular the residents in the Westbourne area. And let's remember, this isn't in the town centre, this is in Westbourne, where there's already a significant amount of development in terms of flats. There's lots of small businesses, there's the NHS, there are schools, and there's very little parking there. And you know, naturally there was a lot of opposition from residents, and that opposition was reflected by a unanimous decision of the planning committee to turn this down. We were, I think, to say we were shocked that the BDC then took this to appeal really was quite, as I say, I think we were shocked, because you know the BDC is there, we thought, to reflect the wishes of the town, the residents, and to develop the town for the residents. This decision was taken to appeal, and of course, as we know, the appeals inspector found in favour and granted the appeal. But of course, as Chair has just said, that does not necessarily mean that we should proceed with the development. We should be mindful of the wishes of the residents, and this council is a listening council, as it purports to be. We should really take those views into consideration. This should not have gone to appeal, and it's the wrong decision to put it into the business plan for the BDC. The BDC are actually being, I think, disingenuous in the extreme by assuming this project will go ahead by putting it firmly in this business plan. It shouldn't be in there, and it should be removed. I think we should recommend this plan is not approved on the basis of its content. I think probably that's all I've got to say at the moment. So thank you, Chair.
Shall I just comment on that? Yeah, Councillor Bartlett, I think all I'd like to say there is that we have probably all other cabinet members on this call at the moment, most of them anyway, and it's certainly something that we will discuss in due course. In terms of your comments, we certainly do listen to everybody's comments.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. Councillor Mike Green.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back on just one point that I omitted? What's particularly troubling me on this is that you know, the bulldozers are being driven through the policies or the wishes of the residents, and the bulldozers being driven by officers employed by the council who are actually paid by the residents. We should remember that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Green, Mike Green.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely fine. Go ahead.
I have a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Bartlett is saying on this, and very much as you put it earlier, Chairman, that just because we've got permission to do so doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right thing to do. And I was particularly taken by what Councillor Bartlett was saying about BDC, the shock when BDC took this to appeal. Frankly, we went into this agreement with Morgan Sindall as partners a decade or so ago. Partners don't take their partners to appeal. Friends don't take their friends to appeal. And I mean, if I can start on Durley, because that's clearly where we've already been speaking about. It's not just NIMBY residents that were against this. As the cabinet member for transport at the time, I was not in favour of this, and I particularly wasn't in favour of it because of the demand for shoppers parking to keep the town centre and the shops around there going. This car park, we were given all sorts, through planning and earlier than that, we were given all sorts of figures to show how underused the car park was, how there would be room at West Hill car park to accommodate most of the time. However, actually, if anybody drives around that Durley Road car park, they will see that it is half full most of the time. And when West Hill car park is full, Durley car park is almost always nearly full. The whole idea of BDC and the way it would operate was to try to pull together all of our thoughts and our ambitions for Bournemouth Town Centre and to balance everything up. That's why there were a series of schemes rather than individual ones coming forward one at a time and being looked at in that way. That's why a partnership was formed. And one of the reasons that we were looking at Durley in this way was because it was assumed, and it's there on the business plan, but well down without any funding or anything, that West Hill car park would go up from memory, I think it's 127 car parking slots to 200. Now, if you're looking at the two together, then that makes sense. Just to take Durley out of the equation and to say we're going to go ahead with that, well, it's not swings and roundabouts. It's taking all the swings and none of the roundabouts. So it's not just that residents weren't in favour. We as a council were not in favour, and we were not in favour for really good reasons. But I want to go a bit beyond that, because the whole emphasis of this this business plan seems to have got away from our idea of these are ambitions for the town centre and this is how we will balance everything to make it work. And instead it seems to be looking at individual profit-making developments individually, one by one. Let's do that because it makes some money. Now let's do that because it makes some money, and let's move on. There is a mention in there about some of the less profitable developments, and I'd particularly point to the Pavilion Gardens, Bath Road North, Bath Road South, which was meant not to be a profit-making scheme. It was meant to be one which will be driven by our desire to improve the cultural offer of the town centre and other public benefits. And this all seems to be getting lost in BDC's approach at the moment. Durley is an example. When we come to discuss the Winter Gardens later, again, I think we're seeing the same thing. And for me, it just isn't working in the way that we envisaged it. Like Councillor Bartlett, I'd actually like to put some recommendations together on this, but maybe I can do that after other people have spoken.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Do we have any other board members wishing to speak at this stage? I haven't had any indications. Oh, Councillor, Councillor Howell.
Yeah, I mean, I'd point out that it is only a year since we took control, and before that, Councillor Green would have presumably been quite influential in terms of the direction of BDC, and I don't believe that we have in any way greatly shifted its objectives or the way that it is being run. The other point I'd like to make, which is this has no influence on where we might go in terms of Durley Road, is I'd just like to point out that it wasn't the council's decision to turn Durley Road down. It was the planning committee's decision, and the planning committee is a quasi-judicial body, and that decision was overturned by another quasi-judicial body. It wasn't the council's decision. It was the planning committee's decision.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. I have a few more board members wishing to speak, and then I'll revert to, I think Councillor Green has some recommendations he wishes to suggest. Councillor Mellor first. Councillor Mellor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's a brief point to say that I fully endorse what Councillor Green has said. The main point when I looked at this, and it's exactly the same as Councillor Green is raising in essence, regeneration isn't just site specific; it's about that real blend. And I'm fully behind, and I'm really proud of we've taken some ownership of some of these schemes and that's a great thing for us to do. Really pleased with what's coming through on Hulls Bay, etc. And we're going to take ownership of delivering that. But then that means it's not site specific, it's not site by site, it is actually, well, what are we trying to do in its entirety. So yeah, more of a general point than a question, but fully endorse the comments from people previously, and I'm looking forward to some recommendations coming from them.
Thank you, Councillor Mellor. Yes, I will just add to that. We are considering in front of us here essentially a strategic plan. If you have a business plan, it is generally looking at the entirety of the direction of travel. So it does seem appropriate to bring these points up at this time, because this is the forum where you can look at everything in the round. Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair. Really appreciate it. It certainly seems, and it's definitely one of the benefits of the ONS to actually identify risks. So there certainly seems to be a lot of history, and I'm a bit concerned as regards what recommendations are going to come forward. But because without having a very clear understanding of what that history is relating to BDC and its proposed purpose in benefit of Bournemouth Borough Council as opposed to BCP, I'm a little bit concerned as regards how it is that one votes appropriately on any recommendation that comes forward to go forward to Cabinet if you're not aware of the back history of the BDC company.
That's the benefit of having all of the papers in front of us. They're quite detailed, so most of the information is in there. But obviously, it will be up to members to take a view with the information that they've digested to date of any recommendations that come forward. I don't have any other members wishing to indicate to speak. So, Councillor Green, do you want to come in? You're on mute.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I've just furiously been scribbling away, and hopefully people can see here the recommendations that I'm going to suggest following this discussion, because it really seems to me that Councillor Farquhar's pointed out some people don't recognise the history, and so maybe I can just give one part. I myself was the representative on BDC for a couple of years. I think 2011 to 2013 I was the council rep on that, and we're really pleased with the developments that have happened so far. But the history is that we are the council, Morgan Sindall are a developer and a private business, and there will always be tensions between them. We have, if you like, more ambition as a council for the place shaping part of it and less for the profit making part of it. So there has always been those tensions between the two sides, hopefully worked out through the board. But it may be that since there has been the change of involvement, as Councillor Howell said, that some of those tensions, well, maybe the other side, Morgan Sindall, has taken that opportunity to try to fight battles that they weren't winning before. So my recommendations are very much based around that, and as I said, if you can see, I put 3 of them there, asking Cabinet to consider very carefully whether the proposed BDC business plan continues to reflect the council's ambitions for the future of Bournemouth Town Centre as a whole, because I feel that it has moved away from that. Secondly, that specifically before approving the BDC business plan, Cabinet confirms that profits achieved from projects such as the former Winter Garden site are allocated to developments such as Pavilion Gardens, Bath Road, where the driver for development centres around cultural and other public benefits rather than profit. Because this is the whole thing, that it was meant to all work together. And it does seem that we're being told by BDC in this document, well, let's do this profitable scheme, and let's do this profitable scheme, and let's do this profitable scheme, without actually committing to the ones that are going to be the place shapers, where the profit isn't going to be there, and the Morgan Sindall part of the equation probably aren't going to be as willing to get involved. And my third recommendation relates to Durley, that Cabinet recognised that the Bournemouth Council's Planning Board unanimously rejected BDC's application for Durley Road car park and considers whether this project should be deleted from the programme. Because as Councillor Howells points out, yes, it was a decision by a quasi-judicial body rather than and it was a decision by the local planning authority rather than the council. But the driver behind that decision was very much what is right for this area, what is right for this development. And they were being urged by ward councillors, they were being urged by portfolio holders not to go ahead with this. This is our choice as to whether to do it or not. I was shocked that that BDC took it to appeal. I don't believe that's the way that you should treat friends. And I think that the council should look at exercising its opportunity to stop what I believe is a poor development. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Green. We have a formal recommendation in front of us. Do you have a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair.
Councillor Bartlett has a seconder, in which case I'll invite any comment on the recommendation in front of us. Anybody wish to indicate? Councillor Howell, you indicated, is it this point you wish to speak on? Sorry, you're on mute. Councillor Howell, can't hear you. Sorry, Councillor Howell, we still can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah, I just think it's rather cheeky for Councillor Councillor Green to make that recommendation. I actually agree with that in principle, that that's the way that would bring sustainability to the company. Whether actually, in these times of real financial troubles, it would be appropriate to make a solid commitment. I'm not sure, but of course, the reality is that to date, the BDC could have been doing this, and under the Conservative administration, under Bournemouth Borough Council, all the profits were taken out of the company and put into the general fund. So there was no attempt to do what number 2 there says. Indeed, quite the opposite. And I am determined in my role to really promote placemaking across the conurbation.
Councillor Green, you wish to come back on that point?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I don't think it's cheeky at all, Councillor Howells. There was a driver there when BDC was put together. Those frictions between ourselves and our partner in the state of Morgan Sindall existed. Now, the intention was always to try to, or was to, use the money from some schemes to fund other schemes. That was always there. If you go back to when BDC was set up and look at the principles for it, it's very clear. It's about place shaping. But what's cheeky, I think, is the way that Morgan Sindall are maybe playing the new people involved in thinking that they can get away with something that they wouldn't have done previously. What this recommendation does is to ensure, if Cabinet choose to accept it, that doesn't happen. It gives a very clear message to Morgan Sindall about what BDC is all about. So that's the reason that I'm proposing those, and I don't think that's cheeky at all.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I have a few other members wishing to indicate to speak on this recommendation, so I will try to move on. I have Councillor Farquhar first, and then Councillor Iyengar. Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll make it very brief. Do we currently have any members of the BDC actually on this call at the moment, and if so, I'd like to hear from them. And if there is an opportunity by this ONS to call the members of the BDC that represent the Morgan Sindhu element of that particular organisation before the ONS.
Thank you very much. We do have a board member with us, which is Councillor Mike Brooke, so perhaps he may wish to speak in a moment. So hold that thought for a minute if that's all right, but I'll move to the other speakers that I have. Councillor Iyengar.
Thank you. Just to Councillor Howell, I think I'm in favour of this recommendation, and with less experience at BDC than some other members on this. But I think what I would, candidly encourage you and everyone on this call to is sort of put aside any sort of, between us, any, why is this recommendation coming forward, and, what's this about, and is the element of game playing. I think there's something here, respectfully, Mark, about sort of the experience of with BDC, noticed in these documents some sort of subtle shift that seems to have occurred, and are seeing something like the thin end of a wedge here. And I think the intervention right now is just appropriate, and it's for the good of BCP. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Iyengar. Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on point 2 that Councillor Green has raised, going back a few years now, I remember the first time the drawings for the winter gardens were rolled out and presented to councillors, and there were 2 sets of drawings. One was for Bath Road North, and one was for the winter gardens. They were schemes. The Bath Road North was to be the cultural offering. The cultural offering. Sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry,
I thought I could hear someone. Okay, the Bath Road North was the cultural offering, and that was the basis of allowing a residentially led development for the Winter Gardens. Winter Gardens, as we all know, has been the leisure cultural centre of the town since the formation, since Lord Tregonwell had it as his back garden, and it's been used for leisure and cultural uses ever since. Now, to give that up, there was a really good reason for that, and that was because the profits of the Winter Gardens would fund the cultural development at Bath Road North. And so on that basis, that's why it's gone ahead. I, at the time, was in favour of actually linking the 2 planning applications to ensure that one didn't get missed. And that's exactly what seems to have happened. And that's one of the reasons why I was in opposition to the Winter Gardens development, because it did not have that element of cultural offering, which is required also by the local plan, I have to say. We'll be talking about the Winter Gardens later on, but I just wanted to give you that bit of background as to sort of back up what Mike Green is saying about what the whole concept was all about. The second thing, I'd just like to make a point about the business plan itself. If you look through it, it's much more of a strategic document in terms of combating the parking policies to enable development to go ahead. It's much more of a strategic document as opposed to a business plan. It's more about shaping parking policy in the town in order to remove the blockages to development, which I find most peculiar. And it's the influence, I think, that has been exerted through the BDC to get the developments that it's seeking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. I think we're drawing the discussion to a close now, and we're in danger of starting to run over time again. So I have an indication that Bill Cotton wishes to add to the debate. Mr. Cotton.
Thank you, Chair, and not wish to add to the debate. To be honest, I think the councillors are doing a good job of that themselves. I think it's really just to note that I am a BDC board member. They're representing the council, so that's, I suppose, some sort of declaration of interest. The BDC is an LLP structure. We've made up of 2 members, Morgan Sindhu and the council, and I'm there alongside councillors representing the council's views. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cotton. I have no further. Councillor Brooke, last speaker. Councillor Brooke. Sorry, we can't hear you at this stage, Councillor Brooke.
I'm just getting the video working, Chair. I hadn't intended to say anything because of my position on the board, but and I'm relatively recent, as you're aware, and I'm still finding my feet. However, I think on this particular issue, at our last group meeting, we did, or at least I did, raise the possibility that Durley would be a controversial issue, and the board and BDC are well aware of that fact. And I think there is a question here of not only looking at the points that Councillor Green has made, but also there are some advantages associated with the development relating to access to the school, and parking and safety improvements and highways improvements. So I think at some point those need to be raised at Cabinet for them to make a totally balanced decision. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooke. In which case, we do have a recommendation before us. I will read out the recommendation again and then pass to Claire to take the vote on whether we wish to take that to Cabinet for their consideration. So the text that I have is that Overview Scrutiny recommends that, number one, Cabinet considers carefully whether the proposed BDC business plan continues to reflect the Council's ambitions for the future of Bournemouth Town Centre as a whole. Number two, specifically before approving the BDC business plan, Cabinet confirms that profits achieved from projects such as the former Winter Garden site are allocated to developments such as Pavilion Gardens / Bath Road, where the driver for development centres around cultural and other public benefits rather than profit. And finally, that Cabinet recognises that Bournemouth Council's Planning Board unanimously rejected BDC's application for the Durley Road car park and considers whether this project should be deleted from the programme. So three recommendations there, which we'll take as a whole for things for Cabinet to consider when looking at this in Cabinet next week. Claire, could I pass over to you to go through each councillor to ask whether they are in favour, for, against, or would like to abstain on the recommendation in front of us? Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify, I'll read out each councillor's name individually, and if you could just say for, against, or abstain. So, Councillor Broadhead?
For.
Councillor Haynes? For. Councillor Mark Anderson?
For.
Councillor Bartlett?
For.
Councillor Brooke?
I will abstain.
Councillor Earl?
Abstain.
Councillor Farquhar?
For.
Councillor Fear?
For.
Councillor Mike Green?
For.
Councillor Nicola Green?
For.
Councillor Iyengar?
For.
Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Mellor?
For.
Councillor Miles?
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Rigby?
For.
Just to confirm, that is 13 in favour with 2 abstentions.
Thank you very much, Claire. In which case that recommendation is passed, and on behalf of the board I will take that recommendation to the Cabinet meeting when they are considering that item. Moving on back to the actual item itself, we've dealt with the recommendation. I'm not sensing any further points to be raised around the business plan. Councillor Green.
Sorry, Chairman. Just very briefly, there are 2 tiny things that I think ought to be looked at. First of all, when it talks about the area action plan, it's only referring to Bournemouth, and therefore maybe we ought to be looking at a similar thing for Poole if we're looking at a Poole Town Centre site. And the other point I had, which I've just is whether Cabinet might want to consider on Cotland's York Road development, that being office driven at the moment in the aftermath of COVID-19, it may be that it would be worth putting in a point that this may need to be revisited. That was all, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Any further comments or questions on this paper? If not, I will thank the Cabinet Member, Councillor Howell, and other participants, and as per the agreed recommendation, we'll take that to Cabinet next week. We'll now move on to the final part of item 7, which is the scrutiny of regeneration related Cabinet reports, which is the Bournemouth Town Centre Winter Garden site, which is again presented by Councillor Howell, who'll give a 5-minute introduction, and then we can go to questions there as well. Councillor Howell, thanks again. Sorry, do we still have Councillor Howell? Are you there?
Sorry, I'm muted now. Yeah, this is a proposal that will move the Winter Gardens project forward towards completion. These are long drawn-out processes, getting these developments from the planning stage to completion, and in almost all cases span the length of more than one council period. As this has done, it started under the last administration. We have continued to invest in it. This proposal proposes to provide additional council funding, which is essentially a loan which is subordinated to external funding, which is yet to be sought in the marketplace. And that amounts to 7.6 million. And then this proposes the purchase of 2 elements of the scheme. The scheme is made up of housing, a car park, there's some commercial elements, but we decided that, having looked at it at the asset investment panel, that it would be appropriate to invest in the car park and the PRS, private rental sector housing, which is clearly laid out in the report. The report's recommendations are to affect what I just said, and to enable the associated financing.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. I'll look for colleagues to speak on this. I'll start again, if I may, which is just to say, as you pointed out, a lot of this has been ongoing for some time. I'm certainly very supportive of a number of aspects of this, particularly around the investment in the PRS. I think that's good for the town, it's good for the council's finances. Again, we would always want to see as much of the car parking within the control of the council as well. And again, if we are confident of the dynamics around that, and in particular the investment side, then all good. And again, it is quite positive to see the grant which has come through from I think it's Homes England as well, which does help to get this underway. I have a few concerns with some of the things that are hidden away in there, which are what may look like the nuances, but are actually quite important parts of the actual projects itself. But I'll hold fire for the time being, because I've got a few colleagues wishing to speak. So Councillor Anderson first. Sorry, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me now?
Can hear you now.
Right, I'm just concerned, if you look at page 193, you'll see paragraph 56, where we talk about, it should be noted the income projections within the financial model rely on increasing the car park tariffs for the site by 50% per annum. And I think that in the COVID situation we're at,
Sorry, we seem to have lost you, Councillor Anderson. There you are, you're back.
Yeah. So how far did I get? I was just basically
we got to the in light of COVID.
Yeah. So basically, I think we need to revisit paragraph 56, and we should be relying on increasing the car park tariffs for this site at 50% per annum, because I think we're going to be in a situation where we will remove the parking from this site, and therefore the income I think it should be revisited.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Howell, you wish to come back on that point?
I should have asked Councillor Brown if he wanted to make an introduction as well, because I'm jointly presenting the report with him, and he may have the answer to that question.
Councillor Brown, you wish to come in at this point?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, yeah, I will just add a few comments just to what Councillor Howell's mentioned. Yeah, I mean, the report you've got there is obviously, it's a very much a sort of financial and legal report because of the stage that the development's at. I won't go into all the details of the financial side of things because it is quite complex, but certainly the representation in Appendix A gives quite a good visualization of how the funding will work. But what I would say is, although it's quite a financial report, it's not all about the financial benefits, this Winter Gardens development. It's primarily a regeneration project. It's contributing to the council's corporate vision, particularly around creating dynamic places, investing in homes, revitalising the town centre. And the council's involvement in it is threefold, really. It's the joint developer with Morgan Sindall through the Bournemouth Development Company. As Councillor Howell said, also as an investor in the private rented sector development and the car park, and then also then as an operator of the private rented homes through Seascape. And I think what I would just say, I'd just draw members' attention to all the various recommendations. Councillor Howell's mentioned it, about up to £7.6 million additional council finance is being recommended. A couple of updates to the medium-term financial plan to facilitate the various expenditure around it, and the purchase of the private rented sector and car park. And a few of those recommendations, and recommendations G, H and I, to go to council as well, because of the levels of investment required. What I would say, if members wanted to sort of understand a bit more of the detail behind this whole scheme, there's a member briefing scheduled for the 2nd of June, which I'd encourage members to log into. And I think what I'd also add, though, at this time, for me, this whole development is quite critical to supporting the local economy as we come through this pandemic and we come out the other side. And actually, we need to really boost our local economy, and the whole investment in this development couldn't be better timed, really, to actually support the local economy and get contractors working and actually push funding locally. So that's all I've got to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Councillor Mike Green.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to both the Cabinet members for explaining this. We're coming from this, I think, from originally from a very similar point of view, that we all see the great benefit in this. And as a town centre councillor, I believe it is the position in town in BCP which is just about the most sustainable from a transport point of view. I see that it is an area that we should be developing, and we should be pushing our housing requirement numbers towards a town centre, and this is an ideal site to it. So I'm very supportive and remain very supportive of this, as I have been. I'm also supportive of the idea of retention of the car park if the numbers work, and the retention of the private rented sector properties, which I think gives us a great opportunity to ensure the quality is there, and also the quality of a chunk of the residents. Where I am more concerned is that some of the ideas that we had when this was put together seem to have either fallen by the wayside or have been reduced by the time it's come to this iteration. And I understand that I'm sort of wavering between what's to be discussed here and what's to be discussed at planning. But I'd really like to find out where some of these have gone, and whether some of these I'm worrying without due cause. We spoke already about this was due to be a very profitable scheme. Now, without going into any of the confidential paper, obviously that's something that will need to be looked at, but it was meant to be there to be able to provide the money that was needed to advance some of the other placemaking parts, and I'd like to hear whether that's still going to be the case. There was meant to be a very good quality public space there, around the roundabout and the entrance, and the only question was how much light it was going to get during the days. But that was meant to be there, and I don't really see it there at the moment. There was meant to be a considerable contribution coming from this towards the Grand Garden Walk, probably through Section 106 or whichever way it was, that we would be able to have this as a link in our walking routes around the centre of town, which could potentially regenerate Westover Road and others as well, all as part of this. And I would hope that that would still be there, but I'd like to check up on it. There was meant to be a supermarket, which seems to have been downgraded to a convenience store, and I'm not sure that it may just be terminology, but I'm not sure that it is. It doesn't sound like so. And if we're talking about 350 plus properties immediately on this site, with several hundred more that are around which don't have access to easy access to a supermarket without going over to the Tesco's in the square, this was where it was meant to be. So I'd like to know what's happened to that. I've also got a bee in my bonnet about the amount of public car parking that's being proposed. I thought we'd made it very clear to the Morgan Sindall part of BDC and to BDC generally that trying to massage the numbers to suggest that we can use 175 of the spaces, we can consider them that are coming from the BH2 development across the road, I think is absolutely disingenuous. The BH2 development was built on a car park, which was providing all those spaces. The BH2 development requires car parking for its operations. The plan was always originally to ensure that where we were doing development, we were replacing car parking spaces for shoppers, and that's what this car park is, 1 for 1. And to go down from 400 to 225, I think is absolutely wrong if we want to be encouraging people to come and shop in the town centre. Those sustainable methods of transport that we hope will bring people in the future aren't there at the moment. It's a sustainable development, so there should be ways, hopefully in the future, of ensuring that residents don't need to use all the car parking spaces that they might need to under planning policy. But I really feel I want to oppose the idea of the reduction in public car parking spaces, because that was absolutely not the idea in the first place. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Green. A number of points there. I wonder whether Councillor Howell, you wish to speak to that?
Yeah. The detail of the placemaking in the square, I'm not aware of. It may be more appropriate for a board member to comment, or for Mr. Cotton. You know, we've already talked about the reallocation, the wish of the board to reallocate profits to subsequent ventures. In terms of car parking, you know, clearly when it was a very different world when BDC was set up, and the requirement for a 1-for-1 replacement of public car parking spaces it's no longer necessary, and I think it's widely accepted that there is, except on a very few number of days of the year, possibly only the air show weekend, that we actually reach full capacity in the town centre in terms of parking spaces. So I don't think that a reduction of this nature it really is likely to have much impact on the ability of people to park at the moment. But of course, you know, we very much hope that people will choose more sustainable forms of transport in the future, and it's a challenge of every authority to try and faced in how do you get people out of their cars and onto buses when you need them already to be out of their cars to give them the supply of buses. It's without government support, it's very, very difficult to break that cycle. But we have seen a massive increase in cycling in recent days, haven't we? And it remains to be seen what happens and how quickly we get a vaccine. But given the length of this project, it's quite likely that people will be back on buses in large numbers once this is built due to a vaccine.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. I have a couple of responses from Mr. Cotton and also Councillor Brooke to a few of Councillor Green's points. Bill Cotton.
Thank you, Chairman. Just responding to the issue about parking and the overall requirement for replacement parking. The idea that you could share the parking requirement between BH2 and the Winter Gardens was proposed by the Planning Department and subsequently approved at Planning Board as being planning policy compliant. So that's the background to that that parking issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think Councillor Brooke wishes to respond to Councillor Green as well, and then we're going to Councillor Bartlett, who's been waiting for a while patiently.
Fine, thank you, Chair. Very, very, very briefly, public space, Councillor Green raised. Yes, it is still in there. May not. I don't know whether it's to the same design that you are familiar with, but public will have access to the whole site with footpaths through and round the outer side, and also in the area which is pretty tatty at the moment. There will be a significant improvement with facilities for seating, congregation of people as well, and it is tied in also to the garden walk element of the overall plan I know the town centre has. As far as the convenience store is concerned, the aim there is, as far as I understand it, to have a local business. The aim of much of the commercial there is to have local people rather than chains, to give it that extra attraction for visitors to the town centre. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooke. I'll move on to Councillor Bartlett now. Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah,
thank you for being patient.
It is going in front of the planning, I believe, and a change to the scheme is coming in front of the planning board this week. So I won't comment on the parking issues or anything related to planning. But what I will do is just quickly talk about some of the financial issues, if I may. Now, as Councillor Brown said, it is complex. It's difficult for the average person like myself, who isn't really a financier, to really get to grips with what this paper is actually saying. But what I am aware of is that the council has already invested 3.4 million. And now we're being asked for another 7.6 million. So that's 11 million pounds. We're also looking at purchase of the car park, and I won't mention the figure because I don't know if I'm allowed to under the the confidentiality bit. But this is significant amounts of public money. Now, whenever we get to talk about money about this development, what we ever hear is, well, it's not about the money per se, it's about placemaking. It's about place setting, placemaking. Well, you try telling that to the shareholders of Morgan Sindall, who are in it to make money, and let's not forget that. And I think that we really need to focus a little bit more on the finances here. For example, one of the issues here is that we're losing the revenue, which is nearly £750,000. I mean, that's an annual loss. In addition, we're going to have to borrow money to add to put the additional investment into this project. That is going to, I think it's going to cost another 440 odd K, something like that. Am I right with these figures, Chair?
I think yes, as long as we're not talking about the ones that are in the confidential setting.
Okay, but if you add those up, you're looking at an expenditure to the council of £1.1 million until such time as the development is built, etc. When some of that money will be coming back. But of course, the car parking revenue will eventually pick up. But here we have a car park that was 400 places. We're now going to get 225. And now we've got to pile millions of pounds back into buying what we once owned. And on top of that, we're being told in this paper that we should not assume that there will be any residual land value in this project. In other words, you know, we own the property at the moment. We're investing all this money into it. We're losing revenue, and when all the bills are paid, hey ho, the land isn't worth anything now because there's no money left. And just to add a bit of weight to that argument is that under the planning approval, I think affordable housing contribution was brought down, I think, to £1 million. Now that's enough for 3 houses, 3 affordable houses. And yet there's 350 odd flats being built here. But it is so critical financially in terms of its profits that it can only afford a £1 million contribution to affordable housing. That's putting a question mark in my mind about the finances of this project. I would really like to see some independent assessment, evaluation, and this is why I've raised the issue with the Audit and Governance Committee to see if the Council is actually getting value for money. It's not just about place setting, it's got to be about value for money because it's public money. So I'm looking forward to the time when we can really explore how these financial arrangements work and what the true financial cost of the Council is in the longer term. And it is complex, but it really needs to be looked at so we can all understand and it's not lost in the complexity of the programme or the report that we see in front of us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. I have one final speaker, and then I'll move back to the cabinet member if he wishes to fill in some of those points. It's probably better to get the questions out of the way at this stage. So, Councillor Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. It was just I've noticed on the conversations, I was actually going to reiterate the point that Councillor Anderson raised about whether the car parking income projections, now that we're in the COVID situation, whether they're actually realistic. But I'd note that Councillor Brown was going to speak on that. But I do have a separate point, which is on paragraph 47. Which was to do with the projected demand for rental properties, whether along similar lines that is now realistic, because with the COVID situation, that demand might actually be slightly lower or be impacted in some sort of way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll move to Councillor Brown, who may be able to answer that point along with the car parking charges point. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I'll just pick up Councillor Anderson's and Councillor Haynes' point first off on the car parking charges. It's not particularly worded well, actually, where it says about 50% per annum increase in the car park charges. The modelling is based on a permanent uplift of 50% in the car park charge in year 1 compared to the sort of current charges in the car parks there, and from there it would be, we've budgeted for a sort of inflationary increase each year thereafter. So rather than 50% each year, it's just a 50% initial uplift and then inflationary from there on. So that's the way the sort of funding and business case has been put together. So yeah, glad to clarify that. If I pick up Councillor Bartlett's points in general about the finances of the scheme, yes, he's right. As I said, it is complex, and I will clarify for him. Yeah, what we're asking for here, as in recommendation A, is an additional up to £7.6 million additional council finance, and in line with the diagram illustration in Appendix A of the report, that's to match the funding that Morgan Sindall are putting in through Bournemouth Development Company as a sort of 50-50 joint venture partner. So that's the next stage of the investment in the project. The medium-term financial plan, Councillor Bartlett's right. Yeah, we're asking in recommendations B and D. Firstly, for an additional £304,000 per annum to update in the medium-term financial plan as the pressure to finance that £7.6 million council finance. and in recommendation D to update the medium-term financial plan to reflect the £743,000 loss of the current car parking income from the Winter Gardens car park that we currently receive, which obviously we won't receive while the development is taking place and while it's being built. And then the bigger one, which I won't go into the numbers, obviously that's in the confidential appendix, is about the purchase of the private rented sector housing and the purchase of the car park. And there have been business cases done for that. So yeah, some quite significant sums involved, as has been said. But I would say that all that being said, they're large figures because it is, you know, a massive development. It's a very significant development, and it's still in the business case, and it's still scheduled to make a surplus. So all that being said, so by the time the development's completed and the financing are paid back to the partners, then it is still scheduled to make a surplus. Obviously, with the latest developments with the pandemic, you know, things are up in the air and things are uncertain. And as Councillor Haynes said about the private rented sector, I think the initial indications are that there isn't any current change in sort of demand in the private rented sector as a result of COVID-19. But you know, we are where we are at the moment, and it's very difficult to sort of assess at the moment what the long-term impacts of that will be. But what I would say is this Winter Gardens development is a very long-term investment. I mean, we're looking at, I think, is it 50-year lease for the private rented sector housing and about 30 years for the car park. So although we're in a current crisis and there's questions over valuations, etc., this is a very long-term investment. So, and that's the business case that's been put together.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. I'm very conscious of time. We were doing so well, and we're sliding with two items still to cover in this board meeting. So I have an indication from Councillor Howell that he wishes to add to some of the points, and then I'll try and draw this item to a close. Councillor Howell.
Thank you. I'd just like to point out that although you know, the site value is up in the air, we would also be getting 50% of any profit on the scheme. In that you know, I think that it needs to be recognised that if this wasn't going ahead, this project would not be delivering the finances that Councillor Bartlett wants to get us going with the cultural area around Bath Road. I think the other thing that's worth saying is that government rules mean that when we borrow money, we have to assume an asset life of 30 years. We can push that in the case of housing to 50 years, which we have done for the PRS scheme. But after that point, you know, we own those facilities. We're no longer repaying loans, and therefore you know, we have a substantial asset which we can't take account of at the moment under the government rules. But we will have that asset. Yeah, I think that's worth pointing out.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howell. It seems to me that the most of the discussion is not about the kind of the big figures of the scheme, probably some of the more what would be smaller aspects of the scheme, but certainly important both in terms of process and governance, and also regarding the specifics of the scheme in general. I have one final speaker, which will be Councillor Mike Green. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you particularly to Councillor Brooke for clearing up on the Grand Garden Walk contribution and the public space. Regarding that paragraph 56 and the proposed 50% uplift in car parking places, I would certainly recommend that Cabinet looks very carefully at the history of pricing versus revenue. I can see in the report it does talk about what the revenue from the site has been over the last 3 years from car parking. We, over the last few years, have been gradually pushing up prices for parking in the town centre, and being able to juggling really to do so in a way that demand didn't drop off an edge, and indeed there was only a small decline. However, in the last increase that we put in, which was considerably less than 50%, we did see a an elasticity response where the revenues that we were getting, where basically the occupancy levels went down because we had put up the prices. I would be very cautious indeed about pushing up prices by 50% and making that assumption that you're going to be able to get that revenue. Mr. Cotton will know well that we looked very carefully in each change in pricing to ensure, to work out what the effects have been, and that's what governed the next review of parking charges. We would not have got away with a 50% increase and still kept the sort of occupancy levels that we needed. And therefore, I would really urge you to look and decide whether that makes sense. I am very much in tune with what Councillor Bartlett was saying about this, this very, very big and very worthwhile scheme. It should still be a big money spinner. And if we are really talking about site values as being as low as they are, again, without mentioning figures, I just don't see it. Because if you wanted to test this, you'd go out to the private sector, you'd go to developers and say, this is what we want to deliver. 350 plus units in these ratios, with these public benefits, with the public space, with the supermarket or convenience store, with these contributions to affordable housing, with this contribution to the Grand Garden Walk, with these approvals on design, etc. I have a feeling that for that site, you would see a great deal of interest of people who would be prepared to buy the site for far, far, far more than is being suggested here, even when you take into account the profit that is predicted to come back to the council and still deliver exactly what the council's after. So I'm going to make a couple of recommendations, which I have scribbled down. And again, if you just give me a moment to see that they work, see that it comes through okay. Excuse me, sorry about this. Right. So first of all, I mean, you know, I'm conscious that I want the development to go ahead, so I'm really going to try not to be critical of it. But the first thing, given the elasticity issue and the history that we've had over increased car parking charges in the town centre and what the effects were on occupancy, I would ask that the council looks, first of all, absolutely reassures itself that those figures are realistic. And second, and this comes to the suggestions that Councillor Brooks is having, that we should still be able to see those public benefits, but it also crosses into where we were discussing last time with the benefits that could be there for more cultural driven or other public benefit driven schemes that we consider, the Cabinet considers very carefully, whether what's being proposed is really what we are after as a whole. So I'd like to make those two recommendations, please, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I have Councillor Bartlett indicating that you wish to second those recommendations to Cabinet. Councillor Bartlett.
Yes, I wish to second that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have a formal recommendation on the table to take to Cabinet for their consideration. I'll invite other board members to have any debate or comment over this, being extremely mindful that we've got a lot to do. So can anybody indicate if they wish to speak further on this item and in particular the recommendations proposed in front of us? I'm thankfully getting a no, in which case I will therefore pass to Claire once again to take a vote on whether we take these recommendations to Cabinet next week. Claire, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I'll just read out everybody's name, and if you could just indicate for, against or abstain. Councillor Broadhead?
For.
Councillor Haynes?
For.
Councillor Anderson?
For.
Councillor Bartlett?
For.
Councillor Brooke?
I shall abstain again.
Councillor Earl?
For.
Councillor Farquhar?
For.
Councillor Fear?
For.
Councillor Mike Green?
For.
Councillor Nicola Green?
For.
Councillor Iyengar?
For.
Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Mellor?
For.
Councillor Miles?
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby?
For.
And that's 13 in favour with 2 abstentions.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you to board members, in which case I will take those 2 recommendations once again to Cabinet next week for their consideration. That draws to a close the scrutiny of regeneration related Cabinet reports. I'd like to thank the Cabinet members, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Howell and also Councillor Brown for their input on those. Hopefully some things to take away for constructive consideration, and look forward to seeing you again at Cabinet. Colleagues, in which case I will move very swiftly on to item 8 of our agenda, which is the scrutiny of environment-related Cabinet reports. We only have one of these to consider, which is the to appropriate of the appropriation of the land for planning purposes at Whitecliffe Recreation Ground. And I would like to introduce Councillor Dr. Felicity Rice to do a 5-minute introduction of the report. Thank you, Dr. Rice.
Hi, can I just check that you can hear me okay?
We can indeed.
Great. Good evening, everyone. So this is the Whitecliffe Recreation Ground paper. This started with a consultation back in 2015 and ultimately gained planning permission mid 2017 and had Cabinet approval in December 2017, and this was to approve to look for a developer to help deliver enhanced sports changing facilities, permanent catering and public toilet provision in the Whitecliffe Pavilion. At the moment the tender is live to find an operator to take this forward, and this will close on the 1st of July. It has been identified that that there are covenants on the Whitecliffe Recreation Ground which restrict the full commercial use of the space, and this was deemed that it would have an impact on any financial viability of any successful business model. We've actually had some questions already about this, and I do have some additional information around the release of these covenants. So previously, the Council has managed to be successful in releasing covenants of this nature. However, this time they were unusual in that the Camford Estate came back to us with a new request wanting indemnity insurance to cover any loss in value of any properties surrounding the area. This hasn't come forward previously, so the Council investigated sort of how to continue taking this forwards. So there would be the opportunity that, the options looked at would be to challenge this covenant legally through the courts. However, this would be a long and bureaucratic process and also expensive. And the other option, which is the one that we are suggesting, is the appropriation of land. This is a power that's only available to local authorities, so private developers aren't able to do this, and this was deemed the most appropriate route. We also had a question about why this is a key decision, and this is because the covenant could be relevant to land in more than one ward. So that was just to clarify a couple of the questions that we've had in. So basically this paper is asking for Cabinet to approve the appropriation of this land and to delegate 2 officers to progress this project once the tender closes on the 1st of July. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rice. Do I have any indication from colleagues wishing to speak on this item? Not seeing any indications at the moment. I'll begin, if I may, which is, again, this is something that's been progressing for some time, and it's very welcome to hopefully see that this will come to fruition. My only comment, which is it's a very similar comment to those that we've raised in the board previously, is about the process. In particular, recommendation B delegates authority to officers to award the contract to the successful bidder, which then essentially means that once that bidding process has been done, the political involvement falls away almost immediately. I'd be looking about what your thoughts would be, Councillor Rice, and again, if the others agree, happy to put it as a recommendation that I would look to see that we delegate authority to officers in consultation with the cabinet member and also with ward colleagues as well, ward councillors, because although there is an argument that the process of a bidding process is a bidding process and the winner is the winner, I do think it's important that we have some democratic control as local politicians in that, particularly with ward councillors, but also as the cabinet member as well. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that, Councillor Rice.
The ward councillors have been consulted sort of over the time, and then there's been a change in ward councillors as well, and they've been sort of highlighted about this. In all likelihood, then I imagine this decision will continue to be I will be involved in any of the development going on. So I don't see any issue with adding in your recommendation.
Okay, before I make that as a formal recommendation, I'll invite others that may wish to have other questions. Councillor Bartlett is indicating. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering why the council isn't taking this project on itself. The council have built out similar type venues and then let them out to an operator or a franchise or something. You know, if it's such a good idea, why isn't the council trying to reap some profit from it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Can I bring in Michael Rowland to answer that, please? He should be here.
Mr. Rowland.
Yeah, I'm here.
Wonderful.
I think I'll probably say that there's a number of projects that we would like to deliver across parks and open spaces across the conurbation. We can't deliver on all of them within BCP itself, so it ends up being a mix of some things that we deliver in-house and some things we're looking for private sector partnership or third-party operators. In this case, the council would be putting some development contributions into the building, but we'd be looking for someone else to put an investment into a business. So it's, you know, we have a pick and mix, I guess, across the board on it.
Chair,
Thank you very much. Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, I guess following on from that, it's really a question of, you know, how was that decision made? You know, what sort of, was there any scenarios run, you know, some figures available that form the basis of that decision about what project was chosen to be developed by the council and which ones weren't? There must be some kind of strategy there that will have had political approval at some stage in some kind of strategic document.
Michael, you wish to come back?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, going a little bit further, that where we're looking at pavilions and development opportunities, in some instances there'll be grant funding available, or there would be, you know, there would be a case for borrowing. In this instance, that we haven't been able to identify any Sport England funding for the improvement of the pavilion. It needs considerable amount of work, and in this location, I mean, this predates BCP. That it was a cabinet report taken, I think Felicity said 2017. So, you know, people have been consulted, and it was consulted on the borough report that was the way forward chosen prior to BCP, and we followed that through.
Thank you very much. Councillor Iyengar.
There you go. Nearly there. Just a second.
I can hear you now. There you are.
Sorry. There we are. It's Councillor Rice. Firstly, just on the one about the ward councillor thing 2 speeches ago. Forgive me if I may. You sort of nodded and sort of batted that one away a little bit quickly. Meant with the best intent. 2 portfolio holders ago, I had some strong involvement in this. A few of us have been near this one. It's sensitive in the extreme. And so if you say that ward councillors have been consulted, okay, fine, we take that. But I would put, there's a few of these like this one, like one May Haynes and I've got in Beach Road Car Park. There's a few others around BCP that would be in the top bracket of local sensitivity, and this is most certainly in that bracket. And I think Officer Michael, will probably be well aware of this. I would encourage you to sort of double check, triple check that base has been covered. And I think the recommendation, please take a genuine hint from us here. The recommendation for strengthened, sort of ward councillor engagement is not made lightly or frivolously. It's in recognition of the sensitivity around this one. There's some real history around this, and we're trying to do what's best for BCP here and to get this done for everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Anger. That leads me neatly back to putting forward a formal recommendation, which is very much in the spirit of that, but interestingly also in the spirit of recommendations that we've made previously about making sure that there is democratic engagement in the process, particularly around things, as Councillor Anger has mentioned, that have the potential to be sensitive decisions. I've just sent through the recommendation to the chat, but I'll read it out, and I'd like to put forward a recommendation to change recommendation B to read: members delegate authority to officers in consultation with the portfolio holder and ward councillors to award contract to the successful bidder following close of tender on 1st of July and all subsequent decisions to enable the completion of the development. So it's just that specific line. I think I have Councillor Mellor wishing to second. Councillor Mellor?
Yes, happy to second that. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant. Does anybody else wish to speak on the recommendation? It's positively received by Councillor Rice at the beginning, but anybody else wish to speak on this particular recommendation? If not, I will then take that to the vote and ask Claire once again to go through the process. Thank you, Claire. Claire is pointing out it might be easier if anybody indicated whether they were actually against the recommendation. Might be a little bit more streamlined. So,
Chairman, sorry,
I'm not entirely sure that is what Claire's pointing out. It might be a technical issue that Councillor Anderson's having.
Okay. In which case, I think it's probably for the best that we pass to Claire to go to the. Oh, actually, yes, Claire, is that okay?
That's absolutely fine, Chairman. I just wanted to clarify with Councillor Anderson if he wanted to vote or if he'd rather abstain from this particular vote on this item, as he wasn't able to hear the whole debate.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes.
Right, I've sorted it at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. And you'll be taking part in the vote?
For, if I could, Claire, just for the clarity, Councillor Anderson, as per the COVID virtual meeting regulations, you can only take part in the vote if you feel that you have adequately heard all of the discussion. Can you confirm that that's the case?
I've heard the entire discussion. I merely couldn't speak. I lost my microphone, not my headphones.
There you go. So, well, every cloud has a silver lining. I'm obviously joking. I'll pass to you, Claire, once again to take the vote.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll proceed with the vote now. Councillor Broadhead.
4.
Councillor Haynes. 4. Councillor Anderson.
4.
Councillor Bartlett.
4.
Councillor Brooke.
4.
Councillor Earl.
4.
Councillor Farquhar.
4.
Councillor Fear.
4.
Councillor Mike Green.
4.
Councillor Nicola Green.
4.
Councillor Anger.
4.
Councillor Andrews.
4.
Councillor Mellor.
4.
Councillor Miles.
4.
Councillor Rigby.
4.
That's unanimous.
Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you to Councillor Miles once again for building the anticipation. That being said, I think that the old ones are the best. That being said, I think we are concluding with this item. I have nobody else wishing that they wish to speak. Therefore, thank you to Councillor Rice, and on behalf of the board, I'll take that recommendation to Cabinet next week. We're nearly over the finishing line, girls and boys. The final item we have to consider this evening, well, the final item of substance, is the scrutiny of transport and infrastructure-related Cabinet reports. We have one of those today, which is the Transforming Cities programme, Transforming Cities Fund programme update, and I'll pass over to Councillor Andy Hadley, portfolio holder for transport and infrastructure, for a brief 5-minute introduction. Thank you, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Transforming Cities Fund. We bid through most of last year, but in November we put our final bid in place. And we heard on the 20th of March, we had our letter confirming our success in getting £79 million of investment from Department for Transport. That's matched by 6.1 million from our own money and 15 million contributions from partners. So the recommendation from this paper is to note that award, to seek council approval, which will be going to the next full council meeting to accept the grant funding from government, and the paper is to note the progress in preparation for that. Obviously, as a result of the COVID outbreak, which was underway at the point when we found we were successful, we have had to change some of our plans, our early plans, particularly around the areas of consultation. But this gives the overview of the 3-year delivery programme and assurance framework for that. This is a partnership working with Dorset Council, because it covers the South East Dorset urban area, so ourselves and the area that immediately surrounds us. The request to the Cabinet is to approve the proposed governance framework that works with our colleagues in Dorset and myself on the Council Governance Board. Can you hear me okay? Because I've just got to, yeah, okay. The individual items as we develop the programme forward will come through as traffic regulation orders, TROs, and so they will go through the process of the Transport Advisory Group and Cabinet for approval. But this is sort of the framework for going forward with it, and for council approval. I think that's probably. I suppose the only thing is that certainly one of the things we are looking to do is to move to a more virtual approach in terms of consultation. So we are looking to stand up consultation software. I've been very keen that's something that the council will make use of in a much wider sense, so to tie it into communications and the wider programme, so it's not just about this programme, but something that the council can make full use of going forwards together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley, for that introduction. I'll pass over to members of the board for any comments or questions. I have Councillor Millie Earl. Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Chair. So the report talks about the implications of coronavirus on the timeline for consultation and engagement and the delivery plans, but the crisis really does present the council with some opportunity to change behaviours, particularly in the public's reliance on cars for travelling throughout the area, and as we move towards a recovery stage and look towards that new normal. The TCF award kind of provides a means, and my question really is around harnessing the crisis and the TCF to be able to have a solution that means people don't go back to their cars. So my question really is, will the management team and board actively look at ways to turn the coronavirus crisis into a positive for our area before everyone gets back into their cars? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley.
Yes, thanks for that question. I suppose two things really. That this is a 3-year programme covering the major routes. We have there was an announcement from Grant Shapps, the Secretary of State, regarding urgent changes to provide better space for people on for pedestrians and also for people on bikes in the short term. And we're still waiting to hear what award we'll get from that. So that's separate monies, but that will allow us to do things away from the key TCF routes. So the two work together. I think in terms of the specific routes that we've got in plan, I have been talking to officers about trying to accelerate some of those things, or particularly to look at experimental traffic orders to form part of the consultation. So to enable us to try some things out, see how the public reacts and how they get on with that. Not least because both Bournemouth Hospital and Poole Hospital are on TCF routes, and to provide some segregated protected space in the vicinity of those would be really useful for key worker journeys.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor, you wish to come back?
No, just to say thank you. I'm glad to hear there's some progress there. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Green.
Thank you, Chairman. We've spoken about TCF a couple of times, ONS, and I'm not going to change the fact that I am disappointed with the results that have come up. I remain unconvinced that the plans as they've been put forward are genuinely going to be transformative, and that was the idea of the fund. But I'm not going to dwell on that one because I think we've done it to death in previous ONS meetings. But the one thing that I think is a common strand between then and now is how much leadership is going into the bid and making sure it becomes a reality, and making sure, picking up the sort of things that Councillor Earl has just spoken about, making it really work to the best possible advantage. And so I was a little bit disappointed to see that neither the leader nor the deputy leader of the council were on the governing board, and I feel that it's important to do so if we're really going to reflect the fact that this should be changing the way that our conurbation works, that the leadership should be there and not just in two cabinet members. So I would like to propose that, that there is a change to the membership, to the council member representation on that board, and to propose that it's Councillor Hadley as the member for transport and infrastructure, and either the leader of the council or the deputy leader of the council should be the other cabinet member who is on there. And I'd like to propose that to cabinet, please. Do you want me to put that into
formalise that if you could, and also if we can have a look to see whether you have a seconder while you're doing that, perhaps? I think the basis, whilst Councillor Green is typing, is that the Overview and Scrutiny Board recommends that Cabinet changes those appointed to the CGB board to be the portfolio holder for transport and either the leader of the council or the deputy leader of the council. Am I right, Councillor Green? Oh, there you are.
Yes, thank you very much. Have I got it right in? Oh, sorry, I put BCD instead of BCP. But apart from that, I think that.
Could you read it out for the members of the public, Councillor Green?
Yeah, sure. It's that ONS recommends that to better reflect the importance of the programme and its effect on the conurbation development, the two BCP councillors appointed to the CGB should be the portfolio holder for transport and infrastructure and the leader or deputy leader of the council.
Okay. Is there anybody that wishes to second that? Looking for indications. Councillor Mark Anderson?
Yes, Chairman, I'm quite happy to second that.
Any comments? I mean, I'll turn to Councillor Hadley first.
Yes,
the thrust of Councillor Green's argument is about leadership within the governance. So I'll go to you first, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yes, I understand the importance that Councillor Green reflects in terms of this transformational change. It is very much about not just our COVID response, which is a very recent development, but also the climate and ecological emergency that we all signed up to, and that's part of why I think the the cabinet member for environment is represented on the board. The board does the structure does report back to a full cabinet, and as was mentioned in one of the previous papers you considered tonight, the cabinet do look at all of these issues together and make important decisions as a cabinet rather than for individual portfolio holders. And the leader is very much behind this agenda and working with me. I think the issue around sort of the scope which Councillor Green also raised is something that we've done well compared to other authorities, Southampton and Plymouth, for example. And Portsmouth is still in the process of getting their funding approval. So we have worked hard, and I believe got a good settlement for BCP from this.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Any other board members wish to speak? Oh, Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair. I would echo Councillor Hadley's points there. I think that when the BCP was set up, and more importantly on the 21st, which we've got the anniversary of very shortly, when we changed to the administration of the Unity Alliance, is that a golden thread was proposed to run through all our decisions, which was the effect on the climate in our decision-making process. So I wouldn't support the recommendation, because I think with Councillor Dr. Felicity Rice on this particular board, she is ideally positioned to support that golden thread running through the transformation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Any other comments on the recommendation from the board to suggest a change in leadership to include, change to the board to include the leader or deputy leader of the council? Any further comments? Nope. In which case, once again, I'll pass to our Master of Ceremony, Claire, to take a vote on this. Again, it's a recommendation to take to Cabinet on behalf of the board for their consideration. Claire, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Once again, I'll just read out everyone's names, and if you just indicate for, against, or abstain. Councillor Broadhead?
4.
Councillor Haynes?
4.
Councillor Anderson?
4.
Councillor Bartlett?
4.
Councillor Brooke?
Against.
Councillor Earl?
Against.
Councillor Farquhar?
Against.
Councillor Fear?
4.
Councillor Mike Green?
4.
Councillor Nicola Green?
4.
Councillor Iyengar?
4.
Councillor Andrews?
Against.
Councillor Mellor?
4.
Councillor Miles?
Against.
Councillor Rigby?
Against.
That's 9 in favour and 6 against.
Thank you very much. In which case, I will take that to Cabinet on behalf of the board for their consideration, along with the a flavour of the reasoning behind it. Are there any further comments or questions from the board on this item around the Transforming Cities Fund? I'm not seeing any indications, in which case I'll thank again Councillor Andy Hadley for attending. Councillor Farquhar is just nipped in there in the nick of time for the final point. Councillor Farquhar.
Sorry, Chair. I'll just I know I was a bit late to the table there. I would like my vote recorded. If that's possible with Claire.
Just to confirm, that's fine. I will record that.
Thank you very much. In which case, once again, thank you to Councillor Andy Hadley for your input on this item. Board members, that ends the main part of our agenda. We have 2 final parts to consider, which are item 10, which is around the forward plan. We have in the past looked at the forward plan and tried to resolve it in a normal meeting and had some difficulty. The recommendations in the past has been that the Vice Chair and I look at the forward plan, particularly in consultation with the forthcoming Cabinet papers, and suggest to the board via email items to go on the forward plan. However, this is a good opportunity if board members do have any further items that they wish to either specifically request go on the forward plan in relation to the cabinet items, or alternatively other items which the board may wish to discuss at this stage to put on our own forward plan, to bring them out now. So if any board members wish to indicate if they have any particular items that they wish to bring out now, if I don't have any indications, my suggestion will be, unless I hear otherwise, that as per usual the Vice Chair and myself sit down with officers and flesh out the forward plan for the next few meetings in light of, in particular, the Cabinet situation. Are we all agreed on that? No dissent? Okay, absolutely fine. In which case we move to the final item, which is the future meeting dates. Again, our next scheduled meeting is for 2 meetings like this on the 20th of June, which will be again 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. In light of the fact that
Chairman.
we seem to be back to, oh, apologies.
Yes, it's 22nd in your paper.
Yes, let me just have a look. June 22nd is in the paper. Let me just make sure, and that was right. See, I saved the deliberate mistake right until the end of the meeting to make sure you're all paying attention. So 10 brownie points for you, Councillor Anderson. So our next meeting scheduled is for the 22nd of June, which is Monday, for 2 meetings, 2 p.m. and 6 p.m.
Sorry, Chairman, sorry, it's Graham Farrand. Do apologise. Sorry, I've just been checking my diary. I've got the Cabinet meeting as being the 24th. I wonder if we just haven't updated the dates to get the schedule so that you're meeting the week before. Can we check that and confirm in the next 24 hours or so, unless Claire has an answer?
No, I just get the Cabinet meeting date was changed after the general publication for all council dates, and in previous discussions it was agreed to keep the ONS board date as it was previously published.
So when's the Cabinet date? The 29th?
No, it's the 24th. It's 2 days after ONS board. Please, may I speak?
So, yeah.
Councillor Slade, I think, wishes to speak.
Yeah, I have a concern. I think if you wish us to give proper consideration to recommendations that are being made at the Overview and Scrutiny Board on the Monday, it will not be possible for us to do that under the new regime if it is 36 hours later, especially if the meeting doesn't end till 8, 9 o'clock at night. So I think, with all due respect, unless ONS is on the 15th, I think you shouldn't expect us to be able to have a report and things ready on any recommendations. Although, of course, we can consider them, but we won't be able to consider them with the same level of detail.
I think that's a valid point. Thank you for the update. I recall that the Cabinet meeting was moved for the LGA conference, which is obviously now being cancelled, which is why we had played around with this. I believe we also had some discussions about moving the Overview and Scrutiny meeting to the 15th, or whether that was resolved or not, I'm not sure. Board members, now is our opportunity. On the basis that we would have the Cabinet papers, as we have done with this meeting, early, are members happy to rearrange our next Overview and Scrutiny Board meetings, plural, to Monday the 15th of June, which would give us that required gap between our meeting and any recommendations and the Cabinet meeting?
So, Chairman, can I just confirm, I think Nicola Green has just asked whether we have published Cabinet papers. The answer is yes. The commitment is that if we hold the Overview and Scrutiny 9 days before the Cabinet, we will publish the Cabinet papers 2 weeks ahead of the Cabinet meeting, so they'll be out ready for the ONS meeting. I don't know whether could I just ask that we could just take the time to check the schedule, because we do have a detailed schedule behind this. I think Richard may have it. If we could check the latest schedule of dates and then confirm tomorrow, might be better than the ONS making a decision now and then finding we have to change it.
Okay, I think that's a reasonable suggestion. Unless I'm hearing otherwise, if the principle of the thrust of what the board is happy with is to try and proceed on that basis, subject to the confirmation the chief executive has pointed out, then we will aim to facilitate the meeting on the 15th instead. Again, caveated by those external discussions which we've got to have. I have an indication from Councillor Anger who wishes to speak. Councillor Anger.
Yeah, only on just one point. We're just talking here about the synchronisation with the cabinet meeting, which is of course valid. Just another consideration is: are there any significant events coming up, whether they are COVID related or general BCP related? Any big milestones? Any big government announcements? Anything at all? Particularly, Graham, please, if anything on your mind that should actually drive when the most appropriate time for a scrutiny committee should be. You don't need to answer now, but could I be asked that that's taken offline and that's fed into the thinking for the timing of our meeting? This is just not about the intercept with the cabinet meeting, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Executive, happy to take that away?
Yeah, happy to take that away. The other thing I've just got in my mind is the 7th of July is the council meeting, so we just need to make sure we're synchronised throughout.
Absolutely fine.
There's no problem.
Yeah. I think Councillor Emger makes a good point, which I should have raised earlier, which is that in addition to obviously the normal scrutiny that we're doing now, particularly around the cabinet items, we are still in the crisis mode of COVID. So once again, we will attempt as a board to be fleet of foot if anything comes up, and will remain in touch with the rest of the board virtually, as well as the Chief Executive and others, if items are, come about which may necessitate further meetings or changes to the meetings. But with those extensive caveats in place, I think we will look at aiming towards the next board meeting, board meetings plural, on the assumption that there are enough cabinet related items to be 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. on the 15th. And again, I will, the Vice Chair and I will confirm that in due course. Colleagues, I don't have any other items that I wish to raise. I've had no further items of any other business, in which case, once again, it's been another slog, 2 meetings today. Can I just say, actually, this is the first virtual meeting where we've had what I would call the normal scrutiny process, which is non-COVID related. And I wish to thank everybody that's taken part in this virtual meeting. I actually think it's been very good, and we've been able to quite seamlessly do some effective scrutiny and some what I would consider to be positive recommendations to take to Cabinet as well. I will take those recommendations forward to Cabinet next week on behalf of the board, which leads me to thank all the members of the board, all the Cabinet members, officers, and those joining us online, members of the press and public. Thank you all for your patience, and have a very good evening.